Hello everyone. I have a couple points I want to go over with you. Make sure you understand for lesson 2 in regard to putting your resume together. So let's just get started here. All right. So the first question a lot of people want to ask is, what's the purpose of your resume? Why? Why do I have to do this? Well, most employers aren't going to take an application. They're going to need your resume. And even if they take an application, you want to have that resume ready. Another important thing to think about as well is the resume gets you the interview. It doesn't get you the job, but it gets you the interview. It assists you in getting your job. It helps highlight your skills, your abilities, your talents, your quality of work, of who you are, but it doesn't necessarily get you the job. It does distinguish you from the other candidates that are applying. It shows, what your special skills are. It shows who you are and how well you can sell yourself, because that's what it is. This resume is your marketing piece to sell yourself, helps you sell your skills and abilities. Spot those strengths that you have, because each one of us have different skills and abilities of what we're able to do. And also, it helps that hiring manager ask questions during the interview. It gives them some talking points to think about what they want to ask you about your previous experience. Oh, I see here that you've put on your resume that you have built a website. Well, tell me how you did that. So they can talk to you and find out some of that information. And it helps, your resume also helps make a good impression. It helps make a good impression on your employer. Just like I said before, it does show your quality of work and what you are capable of doing. So some common tips in preparing your resume. One of the things you want to be able to do is to use a job description in order to target that resume. So in order for you to hit the mark, in order for you to hone in on those skills that you need, that your employer is asking about, then you need to have a job description to go by. It really is very helpful. It gives you a guide of where to go, because obviously if the employer is looking for someone with skills doing XYZ and you've not done it, then that resume you've just written for that job is kind of a waste of time. So it just helps to make sure that this is something that aligns up with the experience that you have, as well as to make sure and look for those key words and action words that employer will be using. So you want to use your own words when you write your resume. That's important, because obviously, like I said before, they're going to be asking you questions, and you want to make sure that it's in your own words and you know how to refer to it. Be honest. That's a big one. Don't make stuff up. Be honest in who you are. Omit any personal information. You don't want to include, anything like gender or race or age, that type of thing. You want to omit that type of personal information. It's just not necessary on a resume. You also want to minimize any kind of abbreviations. If you are in a certain club and it has abbreviations, then you need to put them in parentheses or call it by its full name. And don't use any kind of slang or jargon in your resume, because people will be confused and they won't know what you're talking about. Okay. Some more tips in preparing for your resume. As far as formatting is really important. I think formatting shows you want it to have a clean look. You want that resume to look organized. You want it to be easy to read. If it's difficult to look at, that hiring manager is just going to pass it by. So you want to make sure and use a non-decorative typeface, and a good example of that is Times Roman or Arial. It's easy to read, it's simple. And then also you want to avoid those real over-stylized types of typefaces like Monotype, Corsiva, Comic Sans, and generally stay between the 10 to 14 point on your font size. You don't want to go below 10. People can't read it. You don't want to get too large, because obviously it won't look right either. And you should limit your resume to about a page. If you do need to go to 2 pages, keep your resume at 1 page and make sure it's one full page as well. And if you have to go to 2 pages, I suggest you go to 2 full pages. Don't do a page and a quarter or a page and a half. Do 2 full pages. But for the most part, it depends on your experience level, that type of thing. But I typically try to keep your resume to 1 page if you can. It's super duper important for you to check for spelling, punctuation, and grammatical errors. These can show that you don't pay attention, that you have lack of detail, you're not as detail oriented, and that you're not using your grammar and your English very well. So you need to make sure and double check, have a friend come in and look at your resume, take it to the Career Services Center, have someone look over it. It's always a good idea to have an extra set of eyes. And then again, it's always best to use white or ivory resume paper. So resumes come in 3 formats. There is the chronological format, which is just as it says, it's work experience by your date format. And it describes your activities and accomplishments in that order. So it's going to be typically in reverse chronological, so you'll have your first work experience and your most recent at the top and then go backwards. And then there's the skills based, which definitely is, it's more listed by your important skills, by your activities. It's by your accomplishments first, and it's not in the date order, that type of thing. And there's differences in when you're going to use these. So the chronological is more for people that have had a consistent work history, don't have any gaps, have been in the same field, whereas the skills-based may be for someone maybe who's changing fields in that instance. Now the combination can be used, which is going to have a little of both, and many times from what I've seen, it will have the chronological, it'll have the skills-based information at the top about your abilities and skills, and then it'll list your work experiences in reverse chronological order. So, and there's just a lot of different variations and combinations of the ways you can put your resume together, and for different reasons. And it's really best to have a couple types ready, because you just never know. You want to have a couple variations, because obviously, like I said before, you're going to target it, but then you want to have a couple types ready as well. Alright, so there's some sections on your resume, and these are the most important sections. You've got to have a header. You got to have a header on every resume that you do, obviously, because you want to have your name, all of your contact information. Now, one thing I'm going to say is your name is typically a little bit larger than the other font on the rest of the resume, so you want it to stand out. Another thing that's important is whatever telephone number you have listed on that resume, it needs to be one with a voicemail set up, because not everybody's going to text you. And you need to have your voicemail set up. It needs to have a professional sounding message as well, and also use a professional sounding email. Don't use I'm free on Saturday night at ymail.com. You want to use a decent email address, your first name, last name at whatever, or you could use your university issued email address. So you need to make sure and have a professional telephone greeting, as well as have that voicemail set up and have a professional type of email address. So the rest of the sections on your resume that are required as well is going to be your work experience. So obviously you're going to want to list your title of the position that you had, the name of the organization. You're going to want to put the location. You just need the city and the state. You don't need the address. You don't need the name of your supervisor. Those are things that you can put on an application. You'll want to put the dates of your employment, just the month and the year. You don't have to narrow it down to a specific date. And you'll want to describe your work responsibilities using those special action verbs and job duties, as I talked about. Make sure you go to ONET, and as I talked about in the lecture, and use ONET. It's really wonderful. You can come up with some really good descriptions. So you don't want to use those word for word, but you can. Those will be kind of a helpful guide for you. All right, and then lastly, of course, is going to be your education. You're going to want to list your degrees, make sure you put the type of degree that you have, whether it's Bachelor of Science, Bachelor of Arts, or Masters of, whatever. Make sure you list it correctly. If you have to, look it up in the, online. Make sure you list on the university website. Make sure you list the school, the city, and the state. And you also include any kind of professional certifications or licensures you may have attained. Those are always important, and to make sure you list everything that you've done. And as far as references, do not put on your resume references available upon request. Do not do that. That's not required. That's an old way of doing things. Don't do that anymore. Just go ahead and make a separate document, just references, and only submit those if you're asked for them, basically. But go ahead and have them ready and prepared, and make sure you have talked to the people ahead of time and let them know that you have those prepared, that you're using them as a reference. And then lastly, I know I talked about this in the lecture, but I want to make sure that you understand that it's true. Studies have shown that hiring managers have according to a study, only 6 seconds to look over your resume, and that's not much time. So you've got to make sure that that resume is clean, readable, easy to understand, that there's plenty of white space but not too much, because that's important too. And then also another study showed that their eyes, when your eyes naturally look at a resume, you're going to go along the left side, but you're going to do it like in an F pattern. You're going to go down the left and go over towards the middle and then go back down the left. So you're going to want to make sure and use quick phrases on all of those job descriptions, on all those duties and accomplishments within those positions that you've had. Don't write it in paragraph form. People aren't going to want to read all of that. It needs to be concise and well written. So, you've got a lot of information many times to put on a short amount of paper. So you've got to use your words well and put it together to the best of your ability. Thank you very much.